in completely different realities. Their perception of the causes of conflict, of victims and of perpetrators are completely different. So it is extremely important to establish facts. It is important to make those facts public, to deter continued violations of human rights. But it's also important for communities to understand better the real situation, and only reliable reporting can help them to reconcile, knowing that both sides have been involved as perpetrators as well as victims. Besides division that are ethnically based between Dinka and Nuer, there is one more important division between victims and perpetrators. In this regard, I would like to make it clear that the UN is impartial in sense of protecting all civilians equally, no matter of either their ethnicity or political affiliation. However, we side with victims no matter who they are. You ask, can we protect victims? I would say that so far the number of victims would be much higher if our compounds were not open to people in danger who found safe haven. When I compare this with situation, for example, that we had in Srebrenica, when United Nations were not even protecting family members of their own national staff and didn't allow them to go to compound, and as a consequence a number of them have been killed. With this, it is clear that many people have been protected. However, this protection of civilians on our compounds does bring challenges. There were some attacks to our compounds. As you might have heard, there was one compound that was stormed, including killing 2 peacekeepers and some civilians who were protected there.
Next question, yes.
Thank you very much. With regard to the war crimes and the atrocities committed in South Sudan, have the responsible for these war crimes have been identified? And if so, who are they? We know it's from both sides, but specific names for those who are responsible for the war crimes.
I hope that in a couple of weeks we will be releasing a report which will contain some initial results of investigations. So far we do have some evidence, and we have some allegations that have not been sufficiently investigated. Already we can say that both sides have been involved in incidents of a violation of human rights. Now, I think that to establish those facts, and furthermore to make them public, is important in sense of deterrence. I did talk to both political leaders and military commanders belonging to both sides, governmental and anti-governmental forces. And I had the opportunity to remind them of their command responsibility, meaning responsibility not only for orders that they give, but for lack of prevention of protection of civilians, and also not punishing if violations have been committed. Now, establishment of facts is just the first step towards accountability. I think we should very strongly welcome decision of African Union Security Council to establish international commission of inquiry, which should have an even higher threshold in obtaining evidence than our human rights investigation, and which is paving the way for potential criminal proceedings against perpetrators of these crimes. Historically, there was a conflict between the same sides, quite similar conflict in 1991. It ended by making it up between the two sides. However, there was never accountability, so the history has repeated itself. I think that accountability for what has happened and is happening right now is important to prevent such a tragic event to reoccur in future.
Yes, in red. Can I please ask you to identify yourself?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. No? Still? You need to.
How's that? Ellen Ratner from Talk Radio News Service and Truth and Honesty. I have a charity in South Sudan. So my concern is the following. We can do reports up the hill, you know, but like Rwanda, if the international community is not involved in stopping this, it will continue. What has the UN done, or what is the UN planning on doing, in engaging the international community to stop the genocide?
On my way to Juba, I had a stopover in Addis, and I met international envoys who are trying to facilitate peace talks that are going on. So I met with UN facilitator Mr. Menkerios, but also the US envoy Mr. Booth, British envoy Mr. Morris, and the EU envoy Mr. Rondos. What I discussed with them is inciting sides to successfully finish negotiations, to achieve the primary goal at the moment, the cessation of hostilities. However, what we were discussing as well is the way to move from ceasefire once it is established towards sustainable peace. And that means not rely only on bilateral negotiations between two sides to the conflict, but opening up the peace process to religious leaders, and I met religious leaders in the country, to civil society as well as to elders. And finally, I also was discussing with them the importance of accountability for these events in order not only to patch up the situation, but to try to ensure through accountability a more sustainable peace in the country.
Margaret?
Hi, Mr. Šimonović. Margaret Bashir, Voice of America. To follow up on my colleague's question about war crimes, do you feel at this point that they're coming from a local level or a higher level? Where is it being instigated? Because it seems that the violence spreads so rapidly from, in the capital contained, and then it went beyond to Bor and to Bentiu and to all these places so quickly. So do you feel it kind of spread beyond a political spat and became something where local people felt this was a good opportunity to sort of get back at people they were mad at, kind of a thing?
In a couple of weeks, we will be releasing a report mapping the violations that we are already aware of. And they include violations committed in Juba, especially at the beginning of the conflict, but also violations that have taken place in Bor, in Bentiu, in Malakal, and in some other places. Perhaps we will not be immediately able to identify also the perpetrators in sense of individual responsibilities you are referring to. This report is just an initial report and will be succeeded by more thorough and detailed reports to follow, as well as with the work of the Commission of Inquiry. So far, African Union has made references that such a Commission of Inquiry should address root causes of the conflict, should say something about violations that have been perpetrated, but also indicate the ways how to reconcile the South Sudanese society.
New York Times.
Somini Sengupta from the New York Times. Just to clarify on that, the report you expect to issue in a couple of weeks, will you identify alleged war criminals specifically in that report? And secondly, are you planning to send additional human rights investigators to the country to do the reporting? And are you confident that both parties to the conflict will allow them to operate on the ground?
I believe that in a couple of weeks it will be too early to be very precise in identifying perpetrators. However, I think it's going to be important to identify incidents and violations that have been committed which require further human rights investigation and possibly in future be followed by criminal investigations. Concerning the support of authorities, I raised the importance of monitoring and reporting by both sides. And there were assurances given that both government and anti-governmental forces will be supporting monitoring, reporting, and fact-finding. I was informed by the government that already there were some arrests. The Chief of General Staff and the Chief of Military Justice, whom I met, said that already some 10 to 15 persons from the governmental forces have been arrested and that some further investigations are following. On behalf of anti-governmental forces, I have talked to some of their military leaders, and they confirmed that they are aware of the concept of command responsibility to protect, but also, if violations are committed, to punish, and that they will be supportive in sense of monitoring and reporting on violations. However, if you ask me, do I expect challenges? Yes, I do.
Matthew, go ahead.
Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for doing the briefing. After coming back, I wanted to ask you about this pretty high-profile incident in Juba on December 16th. Many, both the press and Human Rights Watch and others, have reported on up to between 200 and 300 Nuer men being collected in a building used by the police and shot through the windows. I'm sure you have heard of those allegations, and I wonder, while you were there, what did you find about it, particularly on the allegation that the weapons came from a compound under the control of Salva Kiir called J1? And I just wanted to know, like, do you anticipate your report actually making findings on this high-profile incident? And also, Juba Monitor is a newspaper that was confiscated recently, and it had suggested that there should be a transitional government leading to 2015 and criticized Salva Kiir. And I wondered, do you have anything to say about sort of press freedom and what's perceived as a crackdown on the press there? Thank you.
The incident that you're referring to is so-called Gudele incident. And there are credible information on that incident. The so far released report by Human Rights Watch corresponds to our information. I did meet some survivors of that incident while I was in South Sudan. We will be addressing this incident in the report to come. However, taking into account magnitude of alleged crime, it will probably require some continued in-depth investigations. I also met with representatives of civil society, including press, when I was there. The media informed me on pressures on media. The incident that you are referring to is confiscation of the whole issue of one of the journals. They complained about pressure on the electronic media as well, not to involve in reporting, getting some telephone calls. Their allegations were a basis for me to raise the importance of freedom of press, even in such a difficult situation with the governmental officials, including Vice President of the country.
Yoshi, go ahead.
Hi, Yoshiaki Kasura, The Asahi Shimbun. I have one question. Can you say the situation of South Sudan is civil war?
When we speak about legal qualifications, we use terminology of internal armed conflict. We try to avoid speaking in political and emotional terms, such as implied in the civil war. So the language of Geneva Conventions, of its Common Article 3 and its Protocol 2, speaks about internal armed conflict, so I try to stick to that terminology.
I mean,
A follow-up, yeah. Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press, and it's actually a follow-up to that question. What were the triggering criteria, I guess, that were met in the case of South Sudan, leading to the legal determination that the threshold for finding of an internal conflict under Common Article 3 was met? And has there been a comparable finding in the neighboring Central African Republic? Thank you.
The criteria on which such a classification is based include the widespreadness of the conflict, the level of organization of the sides of the conflict, and also when we speak not only about Common Article 3 of Geneva Conventions, but on the implementation of Protocol 2, whether sides to the conflict have a lasting control of certain areas, of certain territory. The custodians of Geneva Conventions is International Committee of the Red Cross. And in fact, they have classified the conflict as an internal armed conflict in one of their public communiques. So I am just bringing to your attention the classification of the conflict on behalf of International Committee of the Red Cross.
On Central African Republic,
Could you use the mic?
on the Central African Republic, could you comment on whether that has also been classified to date as
To
an
the
internal
best of my
conflict?
knowledge, yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin Kelly, Nation Media Group in Kenya. When you say you spoke to the commanders of the various warring parties, did you speak to Ugandan commanders? And can you say whether you think Uganda's involvement is helpful or not in resolving this conflict?
I haven't been talking to any foreign troops, and I can only repeat Secretary General's stated position that foreign involvement could only deteriorate the situation.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Murad Hashim, Al Jazeera Arabic. Why you are unable to identify those who are responsible on the violations? Could you elaborate more on this issue?
Because it requires certain threshold of evidence before reports are released. We are gathering evidence. The evidence is piling. Allegations are being checked. And I am looking forward for the reporting on behalf of Human Rights Division of UNMISS as soon as possible, but only when there are quality assurances that adequate evidence has been obtained.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mustafa Kedesh from Turkish Anadolu Agency. There is some reports that the overall death toll is more than 10,000. Is it correct? Or if not, what's your correct numbers? And do you see the real genocide risk in this country? Thank you.
It is possible that the death toll is over 10,000. However, so far we do not have enough information to speak about precise number. It is quite clear that we speak about many thousands, but I would refrain yet from making a very precise assessment of the number of victims. So far, what we have been identifying are war crimes as well as crimes against humanity, likely if allegations are confirmed.
We have time for two more quick questions. So in the back and then Mr. Abadi.
Thanks very much. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News. In the immediate aftermath of the outbreak of fighting on the 15th, a number of former South Sudanese ministers were allegedly arrested and continue to be detained. According to Common Article 3, because they're not currently serving, they're supposed to be treated humanely and otherwise. Were you able to meet with any of these former ministers or verify the conditions of their detainment?
There is a group of 11 so-called VIP prisoners, and some of them are ministers, some of them are other important officials who were arrested. I did ask to meet them, however, I wasn't able to meet them. Whether that was because I was a lot in the field. In fact, I spent 2 days in the field, and I was only on Friday available for various activities, or whether that was lack of willingness to let me see them, hard to say.
Mr. Abadi?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Assistant Secretary General, for this briefing. You did list serious violations, all kinds of violations in South Sudan. And you spoke about the protection of civilians and the International Commission for Inquiry as some measures to deal with the situation. But at the same time, you did point out that the root causes of this conflict lie in the dissatisfaction, as you put it, of dividends of independence. I know this is not in your area, but who is dealing with the root causes of the conflict at the United Nations, and what are they doing about them? Thank you.
Let me clarify what I thought when addressing the issue of root causes of conflict and lack of dividends of independence. $1,800 GDP, based 80% from oil revenue, is a lot of money for this country and for the neighboring countries. When you give a look into social indicators in the country, then there is a stark discrepancy between available resources and the quality of life of people. Let me illustrate this by saying that in this country, 51% of people live below poverty level. 47% of population suffers from malnutrition. Illiteracy is 75%. 75% have no access to any sort of toilets, not flashing toilets, any sort of toilet. Maternal mortality is between 1 to 2% and is one of the highest, second highest in the world. Infant mortality is 10%. As an illustration, a girl between 15 and 19 years of age has more likelihood to die at childbirth than to finish primary school.
Thank you very much, Mr. Šimonović. That's all the time we have. Martin will be here very briefly to brief you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.